here, and welcome back to the Morning Spice. We've been going since 7 a.m. and I'm so thankful to those of you that have been rocking with me since first thing in the a.m. and like we've been doing for the past, what's this, our third week? Mm-hmm. Yes, Dr. Jana. This is our third week, and welcome to the Permission to Be series here on the Morning Spice with the one and only Dr. Jana from Mayvera Wellness. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to everyone listening.
Yay. And I have to admit that I am so excited about this conversation because, again, like everyone has to work. There's some of the people are listening to us right now while at work. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? The way that our society is set up, you know, all the capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, isms, right? All those things compounded have brought us to this place where you have to work. If you want to survive, you have to work. Yes. So I just sort of want to give folks sort of like a breakdown of what we've been talking about up until this point, because everything has been sort of worked out to sort of get you to, like, from an outward perspective to you being a little kid, and now we're moving into adulthood and what that looks like and all the parts of that. So we talked when we first started this, the week one was all about self-awareness, being able to see your life from outside, checking in, what is it that you need, where you're going, what could have caused it. What do you mean what could have caused it? Then we talked about ACEs and PCEs, which I know on the side for me, I received a lot of information, or I'm saying information, but a lot of people hit me up on the side and basically explained what that was for them.
Exactly. And a reminder, it's adverse childhood experiences and positive childhood experiences for anyone that didn't know what ACEs
is, right? Yeah. Because, and also, like, look, that's one of my pet peeves when people do that. So I can't even believe that. Yeah. When people just start saying, I don't know. Wait, bring me up to speed. So now today we're talking about self-care in the workplace. Yes. And Dr. Jana, I have to start by saying that a lot of times when I hear self-care, the first thing I think about is like Pinterest boards and like like moms drinking pumpkin lattes and just sort of saying, this is my you're laughing, I'm dead serious, this is my form of self-care. Yes. You know what I mean? And like all of a sudden self-care has become this really big intense thing. Like, not only do you have to make sure that you have the candles and all of this stuff, it seems, you know, all the bath salts, all the herbs, all the spices, you know, like all the things, but that's not what this is.
Not at all.
Okay.
Nope. That is not what we are discussing.
All right, Dr. Jana, so let's jump into it, right? So we're here, Permission to Be, and we're going to talk about this. What is self-care in the workplace, and why is this important, Dr. Jana?
Okay, what is self-care in the workplace? So let me just back up just for 1 second. You mentioned what is happening in the world of self-care, and when we automatically think about self-care, we think about spa days and this and that and that. And normally when people talk about it, even within the workplace, it's like take your lunch break, and it's like, okay, and then what? Right? So I just wanted to sort of put that out there a little bit. So this is when an individual and an organization take an active role in protecting the well-being of staff. I know that sounded like a lot of words.
Not at all. Not at
all. It didn't?
No,
okay,
no,
good.
You're fine.
But it's really taking an active role in thinking about what does this organization need to protect the well-being, the mental health of those that we employ. And genuinely, right? So that's why it's an active role. What are we actually going to do? You know, because our staff are the ones that keep our orgs going, right? But there's also personal responsibility as well, even within your workplace, to sort of care for yourself. So that's what I kind of think about, taking an active role in protecting your well-being when I think about self-care.
And I know right now, because I have to say, I'm never disappointed when you come in here. Okay, Dr. Jana always has all the things. So I know this is something that you have created. Like this self-care in the workplace booklet that I have in my hand right now. It's basically a full system for those folks who have businesses, who are working with a number of employees. It's sort of like a step-by-step guide of how you can be integral in the ways in which you implement these practices in your organization. So when we think about someone who's at work right now, for the average, I'm clocking 400. Imagine you are in the casket. I'm working 40 hours at work. I know that, as we start talking about bullying, harassment, and things like that, these are very commonplace in some of the places that we work. But how does this work in the way that I can put this into practice every day as I'm entering these workplaces and having to deal with possibly bosses that might not understand the best ways for me to work? Like, what are the benefits of me understanding and knowing what self-care in the workplace is?
Okay, so let me just let people know what you were describing as a workbook that I've designed. So that's what you're holding in your hand. It's an actual workbook, a step-by-step guide. Includes an assessment, how to do check-ins, and everything in order to understand how to care for yourself in the workplace. It's a short little workbook. It's easy to follow, and it's good for staff as well as for leadership, the people who are running organizations. So some of the benefits of you being able to engage in self-care in the workplace is chances are you're going to be more productive. You are better likely to make really good decisions for yourself. You'll probably be more organized. You'll be able to understand more about why you're procrastinating and how you're feeling. And so that's a lot too, but something to do is to kind of check in with yourself every day. Where am I, right? As soon as you start the day, did I have a good night's rest? What else was sort of triggering me in the morning before I got to work? I already know there may be a co-worker or a supervisor or a task that I've been assigned that, is going to bother me, right? So you're kind of aware of it, right? We've been talking about self-awareness for a reason. You being aware of it is important, but how you choose to manage it is the next step, right? And so that is all a part of self-care. How are you managing it? If you're only going to work and just gossiping about it and running on about it, that's not self-care.
What?
It's not.
Dr. Jana, if I want to talk to my best Judy at work and I want to say, girl, let me tell you how this woman is tap dancing on my nerves, okay? And she's only got one more time to be a part of the Alvin Ailey dance company before we turn this to WWE, okay? Like, well, how is participating, how is that not a form of self-care?
Well, let's think about how draining that's going to be over time, right? And a lot of us get caught up in the workplace gossip, but actually it's really not serving us well. It's not good for our well-being. So after you tap dance around it with auntie for 1 or 2 times and it's not resulting, you're not getting the result that you're looking for, how long are we going to do that for? What else are we going to do, right? And sometimes we may have been to HR, we may have been to leadership, and we may have done all of these things. So now we're going to say, well, is this a good environment for you? Is there somewhere else to go? But that's not always possible. It's not always possible. So we start to think about, what can I do to care for myself while I'm here within this space, right? To be able to protect my well-being. And something that people sometimes do, they tend to isolate, right? So what I've designed has been built on my work experience, as well as research, right? That I've kind of thought about this. So if you isolate, how helpful is that going to be?
It just makes you just do.
Yeah.
So you're just in your feelings.
Either, right? Because now you've made it your decision. You've made it that you're going to decide to speak to no one when you walk into the office, and you are going to have an attitude, or you're going to find everything that's wrong Is that self-care?
No, that's passive aggressive.
No,
that's
we're
creating
talking.
a toxic space.
Yeah, but also for you. So I'm really pointing this back. I like to think about personal responsibility. I'm pointing this back on you. Is that caring for yourself? And so one of the components that I do talk about here is belonging, right? So we all want a sense of belonging. We all want to be understood. We all want to be able to know that we are being heard, right? And so if we isolate ourselves, we're not connecting with everybody else that's there, right? And then there's a part of this that talks about leadership buy-in, right? You have to know that your staff want to feel like they are understood and that they are heard. Maybe not always agreeing, but at least there has to be some validation to say, I can hear what you're saying. This is the reason why we're going to go about it this way, and at least that person has now been heard, and now we have the connection between leadership buy-in and belonging. That is a part of what's been designed here as well.
And I want to sort of jump into this idea of not only buy-in, but we sort of talked about some of the ways that we might think these practices are self-care, right? Gossiping, or I'm going to stay completely to myself, or I'm not going to buy into leadership. I'm not going to buy into the environment around. I'm just going to, like this new phrase, quietly quit, right? Like where I'm just doing the bare minimum. I'm not doing anything else. I'm not going above and beyond.
Right.
But I'm also not actively trying to change the environment, which sometimes can just be draining altogether. But before we even understand that, I sort of want to go into this part of this assessment piece for self-care in the workplace, because I feel like when we're having these conversations, because some of the things that we're talking about, that's not new. They're not new practices in job spaces. The things that we're saying, I know some of y'all are looking at the person we're talking about right now who is isolating. Like you're like the talk about you, Cheryl, is you the talking about, right? But how do I even know? Like, this is what this is assessment for. So like, how do I even know where I'm working is a great place to be, or that the folks that I'm working for are doing their best, or at least showing me that they are doing their best? How am I able to make sure that this is, one, a place I should be, and that I have the opportunity to change for myself? And two, how is it that we can sort of see where this is going and how much work that we have to do?
Understand,
right? Completely. So I want to jump into this. So of course the assessment is something. Can you just sort of break down what this is, the self-care assessment in the workplace?
So this self-care assessment, it has 8 different domains that are connected to it. So it looks at your relationship with leadership. It talks about education, and when I talk about education, that's just your ongoing professional development and learning. Looks at how are you going about your documentation. You know, do you have the right systems to be able to help you to actually perform your job well, because that's a part of self-care. So and it talks about belonging, which we mentioned a little earlier, staff health, you know, which is your physical health, your mental health, you know, your emotional. It talks about your rights. Your rights are part of this assessment.
See, now, when we talked about this, when we were first planning it, I, again, because who I am as a person, right? Like, I'm going to read all the things. But it was interesting to me that one of the biggest parts in this assessment that you have for yourself, outside of, like, I see staff health here. Like, are you taking your sick days when you're sick? Are you, like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Are you actually taking care of yourself? Using that insurance to go see a dentist that sometimes people wait forever to do. But right here you have your rights.
Correct. You have rights.
You have rights.
And that is a part of your self-care journey. This is something that people do not discuss, or I've never heard discussed. Literally, like I said, this is from my research and my own work and trainings that I've been asked, where I've put this in it. So this assessment too has been tested now a number of times. It's been changed to be able to get to this point. And so what are your rights in the workplace? Are you clear on your rights and the steps that you need to take to care for yourself, right? Remember, self-care is taking an active role in your well-being. You have rights. So what are the boundaries that you're setting? Are you being, you know, are you having a number of tasks that you're being assigned to do that are not within your job description, right? No, I get it. There's always a little wiggle room that, you know, sometimes we take on different things. But how are you communicating this, and where are you communicating it? You know, it's your right to be able to say, what task would you like me to be able to complete first, and what is the timeline? Sometimes people let things pile up, and they're like, well, my boss wants me to do everything, so I'm being here till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, I'm working on the weekends.
So that's not self-care. Because sometimes, and I've literally had to do this, working with individuals, is go back and ask these questions. So that is also self-care, your communication style and knowing how to communicate, right? And so having them go back and say, hey, listen, what would you like me to complete first? What is the order? And what are the deadlines? And sometimes you might be surprised. They're like, oh, well, yeah, no, that's not due until 2 weeks from now, but this one's due by Friday, this is due by this time. And that allows you to be able to plan your day accordingly, right? So it's just things we do not think about, where throughout our day we can be practicing self-care with how we are moving within our environment, right? So there's a thing. You have a right to how you communicate. You also there are certain things that you can say no to.
Right.
If it's not within your job description, if it is not safe, it's not good practice, you can say no. No, I know everyone says, well, I'll lose my job, and it'll be all these types of things. If it's not safe and you are being required to do something that is going to cause harm, or to yourself, to other people, you have a right to say no. And some way you will be protected within that, because it's not good for you. Right. It's not good for your well-being.
And then a lot of times, sometimes you'll get those employee handbooks or there's employee things that clearly outline the rules and the way things are supposed to work.
Right.
And for the most part, folks would just sort of read it, move on, you know what I mean? Or not read it, leave it wherever they got it in that bag or whatever the case may be, and not even think to touch it again. But for me, the important part of understanding that a part of you being able to have the agency at work is also knowing that it is your right and part of your self-care to know the ins and outs of what that looks like.
Of course.
So when you are asking for specific boundaries, when you are asking, hey, can you give me a deadline of what this looks like? Can you help me prioritize what this list is?
For yourself.
That's you caring.
So that you can prioritize your day.
100%.
Yeah. There's one I want to go back to is education. Only because I think whenever I train, everybody loves this one. They just love it, like in feedback and everything. So education is self-care, right? And I normally get people looking like, what? Education is self-care? So here's the idea, right? If you've been in your role for a while and you go and do a certification, something that is aligned to your role or will be helpful within your role, and you feel empowered, your skills are up, right? You're like, oh yeah, I can go back to my office and do that. I can try that. Chances are you will be able to perform better because you're now more knowledgeable, your skills are updated, and you feel more confident. And so imagine you feeling more confident within your role. You're not burnt out in the same way. Your productivity has now increased. You start feeling good about yourself, right? So I'm like, education is self-care. So sometimes people are like, well, they sign me up for this and sign me up for that. I'm like, well, do you have an opportunity to say, hey, listen, I would like to take this training, that training, because it's completely aligned with your role, right? Or how are you viewing the training? Are you viewing this training as, oh, I'm just got to do it because this is what they told me I have to do? Well, maybe sometimes there may be some things that are like that, right? But there may be some opportunities for you to choose to engage in learning that actually helps you to be a better person and a better professional within your role, right? So that's self-care. Now, you can also learn on your own. You can read books. We have YouTube. We have podcasts. We have, audiobooks. We have social media that has really great learning that can help you within your skill set, right? And so I tell people, I'm like, keep learning. And sometimes it may not even always be related to your role. You may be thinking about communication, for example, right? That's you learning a new skill, how to communicate. You may learn different ways to record your meeting notes that you hadn't been doing previously, but there's we have things like ChatGPT. ChatGPT. I mean, there are things that are out there, right? Are you staying up to date with what's available to help you to perform in the best possible way. Are you, right? That is self-care.
Got you.
It is.
Yeah.
It's not just taking a lunch break. I do have that in her, of course. Because you do need to take a lunch break. You do need to set up, a proper work environment. Another thing is evaluating your outcomes.
Yep.
The organization and you as an individual should be able to evaluate your outcomes. You should be able to know how you're performing. It always feels good to come back and say, yeah, we were performing at this level, but now we're at this level, right? And the reason why I believe that is self-care as well, because you're able to not just keep going and going and going without knowing what's working. Am I improving? And I'm not talking about the checklist performance appraisals at the end of the year.
Right. Womp womp. Boo.
That nobody pays attention to.
At all. And the questions are completely made up. I don't even know what you're asking me right now. Like, how do you feel about the temperature rising in your in your like, I don't know what you're asking me. I just know that I've been on time.
Right. So it's making these things really meaningful. And a lot of these practices are outdated, and we have to bring it up to another standard, right? And we have to look at it differently. If we're still doing the same checkbox exercises and maybe you changed 1 or 2 questions in the last 5 years, we're out of date. And sometimes the feedback we receive maybe from our service users, right? Maybe that sometimes is evaluating your outcomes. What are they saying? What are they saying is working well? So it can be qualitative and quantitative data to help us to know where we are, and then to know the direction to go in. And then we're like, okay, this is working. We do more of this. This is an easier way of flowing. Versus us continuing to do things that are not helpful, right? That is all a part of self-care.
Right. And I think, what was really important for me and what I want the listeners to understand, because again, this assessment, like you said, you've broken it down in different ways, right? So now we're talking about the evaluation of outcomes, where you can create your own evaluation so that you can have your understanding of where you're going. But that all compounds with the education piece, with the know your rights piece, and how this is all making it a part of you being able to perform your best. Because when you can perform your best, you understand what that is, and you can deliver that easier, right? And in that way, it allows you to see the stressors that are starting to come in.
Exactly.
And I feel like we're just going to jump out. I'm going to pay an ad and come right back, because the next part is after this assessment is done, we're going to talk about, where are we on our wellness battery? So like, how does this look like, and what are the steps now? Done. You know what I mean? So we're going to come right back with Dr. Jana. We are talking about self-care in the workplace today, what it is, and how you can integrate it into your life as we stand. Keep it locked here on Hott 107.5. We'll be right back. And I'm back here with Dr. Jana on the Morning Spice. This is the Permission to Be series with myself in collaboration with Dr. Jana Outerbridge of Mayvera Wellness, and we are talking about all day today. Not all day, but for right now, we're talking about self-care in the workplace. And we've talked about some of the ways in which there's an assessment to sort of see where you're at. We look through some of those things, leadership buy-in, education, right? Knowing what it is that you need to know to make it better. Your rights, understanding them thoroughly, and being able to use them to put up boundaries. And even outside of that, being able, again, to come up with an evaluation of your outcomes. How is what you're doing serving you? Now, for the folks that don't know, this is actually being taped by someone named... And it's interesting, and I know, look, and he's looking away because he doesn't want me to do this, but the reality is that what you were saying earlier is something important. Can you come to the mic, please? So Mark is the person who's videotaping. Of course, these tapes are going to be up later on through Mayvera Wellness. That's Mayvera Wellness. Those Instagrams, or Dr. Jana Outerbridge if you'd like to look at it later. And of course, my Instagrams, which is alex.symone. But Mark, you were saying, don't be shy, Mark. You were asking her a question that a lot of people want to know about. So you might as well go ahead and ask it. Don't be nervous. It's okay. You're a survivor. You're going to make it. Go ahead. Come on. Right? Yes. Who's here? Okay, so what he was talking about, wow, I can't believe that. That's why you're on the camera, Mark.
We're catching you right on camera right now.
But what he was talking about earlier was actually really, really important. And it was like, you can actually tell your bosses no.
Right.
Like, what does that look like?
Yes.
When Mark, we still have work to do. What does that look like?
Right.
When my employer's older, and it's just like, you do as I say and not as I do.
Yes.
What does it mean when I have what does that look like?
Right. So, Mark, your question was brilliant. Much as you're not jumping on, because you made sure to say right away, wow, wait, you can really tell your employer no? Genuinely. And my response right away was yes. Simple. Of course, it's not that simple. And then we did start to talk about, if your employer is older than you and different things like that. So the reason why my answer to that right away was yes is because we're talking about if things are not safe, right? So let's imagine if you are working on a construction site, for example, if you don't have the right safety equipment, right, because you're prioritizing your well-being, self-care, to be able to complete your tasks, you probably shouldn't climb to the top of that building without a hard hat and a harness on with the proper, there's little ring things, and all this. That's an answer to say, that's an opportunity to say, hey, listen, no, this isn't safe. You have a right to say no. So we're thinking about different industries. If you are working within an organization, but you are registered with other professional bodies, licenses and stuff like that, and you're being asked to engage in practices that are against your professional body, right? Or you have an opportunity and a right to say no, because you know that this is not best practice. So that is what this is about, and this is the direction that those questions go in, okay? So this is across the board in any industry. I will put that up against any industry, right? If it's not safe, it's not okay. So this is where we can say no. And there are boundaries. If you're asking to come in and you're unwell and this is happening and that's happening, do you have a right to say no? Like if your health is going to be at risk or it risk others' health, no.
Right. And again, I think when we're having these conversations, and especially from the point where you started this conversation off, like employers who are looking to implement this in a way could definitely invigorate their workforce to want to work better, because you now have something that's like
best practices, and you've been really clear, and you would show. So by going through this assessment, and this honestly is directly to leadership, and fortunately I've had the privilege of working with supervisors and managers directly around this who have been able to kind of trickle it down within the organization, because they're changing their own practices, right? You will show your staff that you want to hear them, that you want to listen, so that you can get the best out of them. If you are having different conflicts and you notice that staff are constantly calling out sick and not really wanting to be there, because self-care is not in place within the organization, and something about the decisions that are being made are not helpful, right? And so we really have to think about that. And I'm going to stay on leadership for just a second. We've been talking about self-awareness. We've been talking about ACEs and PACEs, right? A leader is still just a human, just a person, right? With their own lived experiences. As well as much as they may have experience within the role, you still have your own triggers. You may respond differently to different staff unknowingly. If you can kind of evidence it through your assessment, through your evaluation, and you're willing to look at yourself and your leadership style, right, and your management style based off of how your worldview is set up, you might be able to challenge yourself and make some changes and say, whoa, I do want to buy into self-care more, but I realized because I came up through the ranks in this way, I believe that everybody should come up through the ranks in this way. Especially you asked a question, Mark, around the different generations. And yes, I will have people that will say, I see you, you're taking it all in, but you don't want to jump on the mic. But I will have people say, this younger generation operates this way and that way. And actually in the training, I actually talk about the differences between the generations and being in the workplace, because I think we have about, 4 or 5 different sort of generations right now within the workforce. So there can be conflict, right? But what I challenge people to think about is, how can we see what's working well? And I did a training a couple months ago, and same thing, it's the different generations. It was like, these millennials, this, that. It was beautiful, because what the older generation, more mature generation was saying is that these younger lot, they leave at 5 o'clock. They're on the elevator and leave, and I've never did that in my life, right? And so we started to have a little laugh about it, but it was a true reflect. Like, we started to really reflect on the fact that they was like, I'm envious that they can do that, right? Because I never did that in my 20s or my 30s. And so we said, well, why can't you start to take your power back now? Why can't you? Why can't you start to practice self-care now that, you're in your 50s and you're in your 60s? And it was kind of like a step back moment of like, you could do that too. They're like, no, but I can't. But we, it's also being able to reframe our thinking around it. Why did we go about these practices in this way? That was a survival mode. You don't have to keep doing it in that way, and you don't have to pass that on to the next generation, And I even say to some of my younger generations, like, be easy. How are we communicating certain things? I'm not telling you not to put your boundaries in place, but they understand the world in this way. How are the two of you communicating? And understanding what is needed. It doesn't have to be a battle. It could be a beautiful, beautiful merging of worlds coming together. Unfortunately, many leaders would be older, potentially the decision makers, right? And so they want to see things just one way. You don't have to keep doing that. You can actually get the best out of everyone if we all take a step back and say, all right, how can we make some changes? And self-awareness, do my staff really have to do it the way that I did it?
And is the way that they're doing it working?
Is it working? That's why you have to evaluate the outcomes.
Yeah.
Because it is a part of the self-care journey and the well-being of this environment. I stand by it. And I'm hoping that in what I say, that everyone across the board can see that you have personal responsibility with what is happening within the organization. If you are only pointing fingers, I can guarantee you that you are one of the biggest parts of the problem.
I'm getting like that settled for a little bit.
Okay.
We'll give it a minute.
Look, but you're giving me hand nods over there when you won't jump on the mic. Right? But I stand by that. No, we can learn.
And I think also this idea that it has to get to such a tumultuous point before you are able to take care of yourself in the workplace. And when I mean a tumultuous point, I mean getting to the point where if I'm unionized, I'm going to my union rep, right? Or if I'm really, really upset, I'm choosing to quit. I'm choosing to bounce, right? And of course,
which is your right.
That's your right, right? But I also think what's really important, and when we're talking about the 8 core domains of self-care in the workplace, right? When we're talking about leadership buy-in, when we're talking about your education, evaluating your outcomes, your documentation. Do you have everything that you need to have everything that you need on ink? It's this thing about being able to reclaim your agency of what your employment looks like. So as you are getting to this point, and maybe you would have someone in a leadership role that isn't able to meet you where you are, which is also fine. This is also the start of being able to say, well, I know that I'm taking care of myself, and I'm also understanding from this assessment that I have that I might be getting into an area where this is no longer useful.
Of course.
So when you start going to folks, if you have the ability to, because that's not always everyone's experience, is being employed.
Of course.
But when you have the ability to say, oh, well, I'm going to go talk to this person, all of a sudden, you both are on equal playing fields. Because one, I know my rights, and I also know that I've been evaluating my outcomes. I've been having conversations with leadership. We've been talking about the ways that we can make this happen.
Yeah.
So now I'm coming to you because it's coming to a point where I need some additional support.
Of course. And that's exactly what I do. So I am, and I'm currently doing it. I've supervised in different organizations and stuff like that privately. So I would work with the organization. And as well as if individuals want to come and say, well, how can I care for myself in this environment what we would describe as toxic or not helpful, there are still ways that you can be able to care for your own well-being, being in those spaces. And some of it may be a change of location, right? Having to change where you are working. But sometimes it's some tips and tools to help you to be able to function differently. And sometimes you may have made some mistakes along the way, and it's okay for you to figure out how to correct them, right? And so if anyone even wants to engage, within this further, like, I love this type of work. This is good for our overall mental well-being, right? We are less likely to call out sick. We are more likely to increase our productivity. So if it's becoming too much, I am available to do this training. It's actually a training. You get this whole workbook and everything like that, and you have the whole assessment, and just as the outcome of the assessment, it shows you on your wellness battery where you are on your self-care journey, and then you get to decide. So I don't tell people what you have to do, but we get to think about it. What would you like to improve in? We could pick one of these areas of the 8 core domains to get you started on your self-care journey. You don't have to pick everything at once, right? So you can definitely reach out to me at any time. I want to bridge these gaps. I want to bridge these gaps for the generations and for you as an individual and organizations with self-care.
And I think the biggest thing is that this is something that if you are an employer or if you are employees that are listening right now in your space and you're like, this might be something interesting to take forward and say, is this a way that we can start at least the conversation of what this could look like? They can contact you for the self-care in the workplace.
The training.
Right. And that's through Mayvera Wellness as well.
Yes, of course, through Mayvera Wellness or Dr. Jana Outerbridge. So you can just email me, info@Mayvera Wellness, info@MayveraWellness.com, and I can follow up with you and I can send you more information about the training. This is ideal for teams, for larger organizations, or if you and your colleagues want to sign up and say, we just want to come and do this, then you can. And I do individual one-to-one work on this as well.
And I have to say, Dr. Jana, that I know for both of us, right?
Yes.
This is probably something that when we were fresh out of uni would have been great to be able to have a first step of what it looks like walking into a career space. Because for some folks, some of these things do sound like, I could totally do that.
Yes.
But the practice of such, and also the reformation that, yes, this is how you genuinely take care of yourself and being able to move with your own responsibility and your own self-awareness, but also that bridging of advocacy for self.
Of course.
And I want to say, like, something like this to come from someone who I know who has had to learn through experience, but also with your expertise, I would encourage everyone to have these conversations. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. I've actually designed a training. I've already been I'm doing that for some summer students for one of our larger companies here in Bermuda. So you bring up a really good point.
Yeah.
I've already been asked to do it, and we'll be doing that training. So if anyone else wants that for their summer students as well, so that they can come into the workforce differently, I'm doing that training. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jana. I feel like going through this also for folks who are listening, I know for myself, I'll speak from an I space, being able to know that self-care doesn't necessarily look like me just taking a lunch break. It actually means being able to have the tools that I need to make sure that I can advocate for myself.
There we go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for the rest of you That's it. It's 10:03 and the morning spice is done. So I want to say thank you so much to everyone who has been rocking with me since 7 a.m. Again, I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Jana for being with us and talking about self-care in the workplace. Now, if you want to learn more, make sure to check out Mayvera Wellness. That's Mayvera Wellness to learn a little bit more and see how your job or your organization can use this training. Now, like I always say, mind the business that pays you, not the one that occupies your time. And always remember to pour into yourself so you can manifest the life that you deserve. God willing, I'll see you all tomorrow. But until then, I'll meet you on the other side of greatness. Peace. Later.
Peace. Peace. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.